So Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It is my understanding that you're a very gifted person. You have been gifted since a child. And can you tell me exactly how this all started for you?
I can. When my grandfather died, I think he was 67 years old and I was 12. Mm-hmm. And I think it was the next night or the following day that he was sitting at the end of my bed. I wasn't there when he died, but he was sitting there on the end of my bed and communicating with me. And he was very kind, he was very loving and very calm. And that's what I felt when he was sitting at the end of my bed. So it was really astonishing for me.
And do you know why he wished to present himself to you and not anybody else in your family, for example?
He may have presented himself to other people, but nobody talked to me about it. I talked to my grandmother about it. And I think this was his way of saying goodbye and letting me know that his spirit goes on, right, and that he loved me. Right. We were very close.
So it sounds like what you've experienced as a child and what you're doing today as a profession is to help others with their loved ones departing. And so this is what you do on a daily basis pretty much, right?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell us exactly how it feels for you? Because not only you are connecting to people you never met before, but sometimes they could be very different people, obviously different personalities. Some people may be worse than others. Can you give us some examples on your experiences?
It's very challenging to do the kind of work that I do because you need some good people skills for starters, and then I needed to get some training around this. I knew I was empathic. I knew I could see into people's lives, into their bodies, and communicate with departed souls. So in order to be able to help people with their grief and loss, I decided to get extensive training. I really needed it anyway because I was overwhelmed by the occurrences.
So that's actually a very interesting point. You mentioned that you are helping others to do their grief, but how about the departed ones? Do you feel that they have any kind of grief themselves? Is this the reason why they are staying behind for their loved ones? Or what do you think it is?
That's an excellent question, because when I did a reading for someone whose loved one had taken their own life, it was a very difficult reading because the departed spirit was right beside me, communicating to someone through Skype, through me, through Skype. And they were very sorry about what they did and communicated that to their loved one. And the loved one was crying. And I was overwhelmed, especially at the end of the reading, because the information that the departed soul gave to their loved one who's still living was so accurate. And at the end of the reading, I, closed Skype and I just stood and prayed and asked, should I be doing this? How does this work? How can I do this? Because I really felt that the departed soul was healed, even though they're deceased. And the living person was healing right in front of me. So I was humbled and in awe.
So do you feel that the departed ones are already in contact with the source or heaven, whatever you want to call it? Or is it something that they're not really aware of at that stage, still remaining on our plane before moving on?
That's a very good question.
Sorry to keep
asking this kind of questions. I think in those kinds of cases where someone has died suddenly or taken their own life and they don't really understand yet, I think they are stuck here and they're looking for somebody to communicate with or through. And then I think, especially in that reading, I think that departed soul was able to move on. Okay. Because I could feel them heal, even though it's like an interdimensional experience. It was very touching.
So when you're talking to people who have grief, do you feel the departed souls, or do you see them as well?
I can feel them, I hear them, I see them.
Wow. Yes. And how do they present themselves? Are they just around yourself, around the your patient, your not patients, but your clients, or how do they present themselves?
Well, different ways. It depends how they died. One person that was deceased showed me the whole scene of how it was that person died. Mm-hmm. And it was really complicated and very extensive. And I was able to give that information to the client. And there were actually two of them that had come to reconnect with their departed one because they didn't understand how their loved one died. Mm-hmm. So it was really a complicated death, and I was able to give them really clear information. And the deceased person even showed me the position of their body when they were found. Wow. Which one of the clients found the person in that position. And that's just one example. There are many examples. There was another example, and from this one I cried all the way home. It was really upsetting for me. They showed me, this deceased person showed me their children and their spouse and how they died and what result or information they wanted to pass on to help resolve their death. That was really difficult, that one. Mm-hmm. And of course, because I'm an empath, I feel how they died. I feel the pain in their body and their emotional body as well. Yeah.
Now, it is also my understanding that when spirits or souls volunteer to incarnate on Earth, they already have an inner knowing as to know what kind of life they're going to go through. Do you share this experience or this knowledge through meeting with those souls, departed souls, or not really?
I don't, but I do in my own life, because I had a near-death experience and I was outside of time and space, and I had a life review and a future review. Mm-hmm. And so I came back knowing what I would be doing.
Mm-hmm. So that was in 1996? Yeah. Yes. So prior to 1996, you were involved in politics. You are a businesswoman as well. So you had multiple talents, but which had nothing to do with what you are doing today, right?
That's true.
So would you say that this transition occurred after 1996, where you fully dedicated yourself to this new role?
Yes, it felt like whoever I was died, mm-hmm. and somebody else took over.
Really?
With a whole new life plan, and I didn't even recognize my spouse or my children or my life. Mm-hmm. So it was a great shock.
So all of your gifts were amplified in the process. Mm-hmm. And how could you describe your near-death experience? Is that okay with you?
Okay, I had been asked to work for a woman who was sick one night, mm-hmm. at a neighborhood pub in our community. Mm-hmm. And at the time, my children were quite young. They were only 7 and 8 years old. And my husband was at home looking after them. Mm-hmm. And so here I am working. I was the only one in this pub. I think it was January the 2nd. And it was after New Year's Eve party. Mm-hmm. And I felt very uncomfortable as the night progressed. And I was on the phone to my husband for about 4 hours of an 8-hour shift, telling him there's something wrong, there's something wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it in my gut. And I was afraid, and I didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. The phone was just kind of like a lifeline. And as it came to a close of the night, and I was locking up the doors and windows and setting the alarm, I thought I could hear noises outside, and I became really frightened. And I was trying to talk myself out of my fear. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, it's just because I'm a woman, it's late at night, I'm alone, and Mm-hmm. So I had my car keys in my hand and I bolted out the back door and slammed the door behind me. And as I was doing that, I was rushed by 2 armed men in ski masks, and they beat me up very badly and put their hand over my mouth, a shotgun against my head, and a crowbar in my face, and demanded that I let them in the building. And finally, when they let me talk, I said, I don't have keys to get back in. These are for my car, and my car was parked right there. So they believed me, and they told me to get in my car and leave. So I really believed I would die there. I thought, I can see the bullets coming out. It felt that close.
Right.
And I went to the police station, or no, a friend of the owner who phoned the police, and the police came and picked me up and took me to the police station. So I filed a report.
Right. So it's not like you nearly died in a way that you were left in a hospital bed where you were in a coma, or
no.
So it was more of like an awakening in a way.
It was a fear death. There's where you really believe you're going to die.
Yes.
So I had described the experience to a neurologist in Vancouver who was educating other doctors and nurses about brain function. And when I described the armed robbery assault, he said, well, in that kind of situation, what happens is you have a fight or flight response, and your adrenaline peaks, and if you cannot escape, there's a cascade of hormone, it's a death hormone, that prepares your body for death. And at that moment, he said, you can focus on everything all at once, past, present, and future. That's why some people say they remember a life review, and then other people have a future review.
Right.
But that it takes years to integrate all of those images. And it certainly fit my experience.
Right, and because you already had this kind of gift since a child, I guess it was obviously amplified, and it was, you didn't really need much to actually go to the next level and to experience what you were experiencing today in a full manner. Going back to your 1996 near-death experience, you mentioned that you came out of your body during that period. Could you tell me exactly when this occurred and what happened exactly?
It's hard to define exactly when I came out of my body, but because I had a period of 11 months of amnesia. And when I started coming out of amnesia, I realized I couldn't read, not one word. And that's when I realized I had a brain injury. And I didn't realize I had children or a husband, and I didn't recognize my life. So it was quite profound. And in that period of time, I remember being outside of time and space, in another dimension, with beings who gave me a life review. And then I saw a future review as well. And so when I came back to my body, it was like, whose body is this? And like, I thought I was dead. And why am I back? And whose body is this? So I had to adjust all over again.
Were these beings like white beings? How did you see them, obviously? How did they look like?
They looked like Nehru, believe it or not, from India, 3 of them. And with the Gandhi cap, the white flat Gandhi cap, and white robes, white garbs.
Okay, so they looked humans.
They did.
Okay.
But they weren't.
Right.
Because their information exuded into me like telepathy. And it was vast amounts of information.
Did you have any relations with Buddhism or were you interested in the subject at that point?
Not at all.
Okay.
But after that, I studied Hindu religion and all the religions and all the philosophies to try and understand what happened.
Now, do you think that this near-death experience in 1996 was somehow related to what you've experienced as a near-death experience when you were 15 years old? That you had another experience when you literally died and the doctors had to resuscitate you and revive you.
I don't remember anything from that near-death experience, other than what the doctors told me and my mother told me.
Right.
But I did have another near-death experience when I was 15, where I nearly died from a very serious illness. And I dreamt, actually, that an angel took me up to heaven. And when I came back, the next day, the doctors came in and said, you know, they were shocked because I was well. And they called it a miracle. And I'm still at a loss as to explain really how that happened.
So Terry, are you from a religious background of any kind?
My father was Roman Catholic, and so I remember he took us to church a couple of times. That's all I remember. And then in my teens, I think when I was 15, I found a Christian church and attended that with my boyfriend. But after the near-death experience, well, stepping back, I did attend church a lot. I was a youth group leader in a variety of churches, and had faith, a very, I thought, solid foundation of faith.
And did your experiences change all of that?
Absolutely. After my near-death experience, I didn't want to go to church anymore. They didn't explain this, what I would call a real spiritual experience. For me now, my understanding of religion is it's a good foundation, kind of like kindergarten, for true spiritual enlightenment. And I feel like after my 1996 near-death experience, I did become enlightened. And it was a very difficult adjustment because I didn't have support to understand. I had to really go out and find it.
So why did the Catholic faith change your views based on duality, basically, mainly? You realized that somehow the evil forces versus the good forces didn't really exist. How did it really truly change your views?
Well, I feel like what happened was a real spiritual experience, not religion. Religion is knowledge-based, I suppose, or education-based. But when you have a real spiritual experience or awakening, it's totally different. It's like talking about eating an ice cream cone versus actually eating an ice cream cone. You know the difference, and you can't deny the flavor and the feel of ice cream. That's how I mean, that's a simplified explanation or comparison, but yeah, it's totally different. Yes. Religion is not spirituality.
So you basically moved on from that ND experience in 1996 to remote viewing. What led you to choose that particular technique out of them all?
Well, when I returned to my original doctor that attended to me after the armed robbery assault, I explained to him what happened. He said, "Oh, Terry, you've had a near-death experience." So that's how I found the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And from that, I started reading about other scientists and professionals in the world. And there was a conference in America, and one of my favorite scientists was going to be speaking, along with Ingo Swann, who is a psychic. So I went to the conference, and here it was, the International Association for Remote Viewing. And there I found my peers. And I was quite amazed and kind of nervous at the same time because the CIA was there. And I learned had been quite heavily involved in remote viewing.
Was Ingo Swann not involved with the CIA in the first place?
Yes. But I realized that, I needed to get some training to learn how to harness and hone these abilities. And they were the first organization that I found after helping run the Vancouver Island Near-Death Experience Association for 7 years.
So going back to this association, could you tell us exactly, from the people joining this association and being sharing their experiences, how different those people were, like in terms of, you mentioned near-death experiences, but also fear near-death experiences. So how would you differentiate them? Or even mentioning the percentage of the people who actually had real near-death experiences compared to fear-based ones?
I don't know if there's much difference physiologically and spiritually.
Okay.
When I helped run the organization, we held monthly support groups for anybody who had a near-death experience, and hosted conferences and television shows and presentations at universities, and we interviewed a lot of people, and most of them had been dramatically changed after a near-death experience, where in their personalities and their abilities.
Did they experience any abilities like yours in majority, or not really?
Well, a lot of people had out-of-body experiences and they didn't know what that meant, and they had these a few abilities, but they didn't come out much about them. Not sure why. We were not addressing the scope of abilities that can happen to people in those early years. That was a long time ago.
So Terry, one of the first practices or techniques that you've used was remote viewing. And could you tell us exactly or describe how remote viewing allowed you to access a higher level of consciousness?
The first conference that I went to in America for remote viewing, they asked the audience to get involved in a session. And I was astounded at what I could do. They call it the outbounder, and they send someone out into the desert and they videotape where they're going. And while they're out and away, we are doing a session in remote viewing to see or sense where they are, what they're doing. And then they come back with the video and they show us. And then you get to check your work against the actual location.
So can you describe the process?
Yes, it's a new language that they teach you, which are characters, and that's your language. It's quite simple, and you have to practice that a lot because it needs to become second nature. When you're given a set of 6 numbers, then you do what's called an ideogram, and from the ideogram you read that, and that gives you the data from the target that they want you to gather information on.
Mm-hmm. So remote viewing had kind of a bad rap because of its use by the KGB, by the CIA to remote not only access information but also to potentially harm people through telling people that they could either kill someone else or even kill themselves. Did you have that kind of sense when you learned about remote viewing in the first place?
There was one of the training that I took was on remote influencing, and we were taught not to use it in a bad way, because in the positive, for example, I'll give you a positive first. We were in a class, private classes, and we got one of the people to leave the salon, and together the rest of the class made a target to make the person feel something. And I said, okay, let's make the person think that their hands are in a bucket of ice. And then they call the person in, and we said, well, how are you feeling? Oh, my hands are so cold. So it's like, okay, well, that's in the positive. You can take it to the negative and make someone feel bad. If you go on the other extreme, I'm sure it can be used for healing, because it's the same energy.
Right, and this was actually proven by Berkeley University when they did this test against, with flowers, trying to project bad emotions towards a flower, and then the flower will die much quicker than the healthy flower who was only receiving emotions of love and compassion. So what you're experiencing through remote viewing is pretty much the same experience. It's literally the same thing. But now, do you believe that this has to happen with just one person or of a group of people? How does it, is it amplified? Is the result amplified as a group or just with one individual?
That's a very good question. I don't think it matters. I think it depends on the person's intention and their energy and their abilities and their training. I watched a video where it was actually a film about the wrong use of controlled remote viewing, and the producer of the film wondered why it wasn't a big hit. And I told them, it's very dark content. Nobody wants to see this. The general public does not want to see this kind of film. If you could put these skills into a more positive framework, then yes, you can have a positive outcome.
So the term remote viewing is pretty limiting when you consider exactly its potential. When you are trying to help others, trying to use it in a healing way, how could you even describe the process of how you can heal someone with remote viewing?
I believe that it would be through intention. You set your intention. It's to send someone love and positive energies, because before I start any reading, I center myself and I change my energies. I connect to my heart, come out of my head. I ask the person to do the same thing so that they come out of their head and go into their heart beating. That creates a biological change and an energetic change. And from that you can, as Lynn Buchanan said, create miracles. And I do believe in miracles.
But do you believe that this intent can go against someone's will, even in a positive manner?
That's a good question, isn't it? Yes, I think it could, because we all do have free will. So that's part of the skill set that I've adopted into my readings, is through a prep sheet, telling the people, or advising them, I guess, that I'm not going to tell you what to do. You need to use your free will. I can give you information, I can give you impressions, but it's up to you what you do with it. When you're sending healing energy, it's usually because I've either had a dream about someone, or they've bilocated to me, or I've bilocated to them, and I know that they need help, or I've heard that they're sick. And so then I send healing energy as a service.
So this was actually one of my next questions to do with bilocation. So through remote viewing, can you explain the difference between seeing someone in or feeling his emotions or sending good intent versus bilocating? Can you explain the difference and what's the process to get to the bilocation aspect?
That's a good question too. Bilocation. My last experience with bilocation was someone bilocated to me, standing right outside the glass doors. I could see him clearly. And I knew that person had just had a near-death experience. So I emailed them and let them know, hey, do you realize you're bilocating? Which is, from what I understand in controlled remote viewing, full sight contact. And I have done bilocation myself with a variety of people on the planet, but it has never been done to me. So, well, no, I shouldn't say that. It was twice. So from what I understand, the light body, the ethereal body, is the one that can move through time and space independent of the physical body.
Right.
So, or astral body, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
And that our consciousness can travel with that etheric body anywhere, anytime.
And people can see us the way we look like in physical form. Okay. And are you aware that bilocation obviously happens without even the subject's knowledge?
Ask it a different way. What do you mean by that?
So if someone, for example, bilocates without knowing that they're actually doing it, without setting an intent, and why do you think this would even happen or occur in the first place?
Well, when it happened to me about a month ago by somebody else, I thought, oh, they're spying on me. You know, they're controlled remote viewing me, you know. And I thought, well, why would they be spying on me? But then maybe that's not the mechanism. I think sometimes that it's, what's that word? That it just happens because you've reached that level of awareness and capacity, so that your soul or your etheric body can travel to where it's needed for some kind of influence.
So this could potentially be to do with multiple timelines that we are on, that we might not be aware of the various possibilities in our life, that we might still be involved without being aware of it.
Oh, that's very true. I think so. I do. There's more going on here than we really fully understand because of the interdimensional abilities that we have.
This is the main subject of our show called Open Timelines, which is to explore the various possibilities of various timelines that we are on without being aware of them, because once we diverge from an existing timeline to another, we'll never know the difference, because we'll all be part of that same timeline as part of the collective consciousness. And somehow we are all within that aspect of timelines, that we are all experiencing different lives, but somehow it's all part of the same experience.
I've had those kinds of experiences since my last near-death experience, where I saw through dreams, precognitive dreams, a list of events that would happen, and then they started happening in order. And I was very curious and investigated it and proved it, how it works. And then, like deja vu, I would get to the power of 10. It was quite profound, not simple deja vu. And through a lot of experimentation and research, found my way through these timelines, I guess is the best way to put it. Some things still haven't happened, but I know they will.
Yes.
I just haven't put a time on it when it will happen, because that was part of my training.
So are you still using remote viewing to explore the future, and then even you're an intuitive healer, what do you call it, medical intuitive. So as a medical intuitive, do you use remote viewing to explore not only the past, but the future of everybody? Somehow not being able to differentiate potentially someone's illness as being present, but something that may happen in the future. How can you put a timeline on that?
That has been a great challenge. I was taught how to move forward and backward in time. At the intermediate level of controlled remote viewing with Lynn Buchanan. And so everyone in the class gets to see a target, the picture, and I don't. And I have to describe it. And then Lynn said, okay, go back in time before the event and tell me what you feel. And I said, there's something holding back. And then he said, okay, now go forward in time as the event is happening, and what do you feel? And I said, my whole body, I'm shaking, something's falling down. And then at the end of the session, they showed me the picture, and it's the suspension bridge in Seattle falling down. And I mean, there's a lot of other details in that target, but I had a full body feeling of what was happening at the site. And so I get that as a medical intuitive. I can feel what's going on in a person's body. I can feel it wherever it is in their body. I can see it. I can feel it in the intensity of the frequency. And I can do timelines. I've learned how to do timelines where it's either a week out, a month out, or farther away, or even in the past, because I can feel how a person died years ago, and I can feel their heart attack. I can feel their brain like a stroke, or any other way that they died, or the illnesses that they had. I'm just reading frequencies is what I'm doing.
So Terry, can you explain to me how, also what led you to remote viewing in the first place?
Well, I have a brother, and one night I had a really bad dream about my brother and his son, about a car accident, and I felt that I should phone him and warn him. But I didn't, because I was hurrying to catch a flight into America, and so I didn't have his phone number, so I had to phone one of our sisters, and I got the phone number from her, and I told her about the dream. And so I still didn't phone my brother because I was in such a hurry. Anyway, I came back 2 weeks later, and I had another dream that I was on a bed, and there was a child on the bed, and this bed was moving into a hole in the wall, and there was a cloudy brain, and another component to the dream that I can't disclose. But I woke up and I thought, whoa, what is this? This is not a dream. This is a visit with a child, but who's the child? And I didn't know what it meant. And so when I went to work, I was explaining to a woman at lunch about this dream. And my sister phoned me and said our nephew had been hit by a car that night. They had given him an MRI scan, and he had a profound brain injury. He was in a coma. So we all met in Vancouver at the Vancouver Children's Hospital, and my brother told me what happened. And then he took me into the room, and here's this little 8-year-old boy laying in a coma, and it was the first time I'd met him. And I was shocked and wondered how I could have these two experiences with him and not even know him. And I carried a lot of guilt for a long time, and that's what urged me, I suppose, forward to get training in controlled remote viewing. When I sat with my teacher, I said, well, if we can see the future, can we change it? And he said yes, and that's when he took me on this time experiment, going forward in time and backward in time. And so in my readings now, that's what I do. I do timelines. I go into the future, and I can see or feel, or both, see and feel what's happening or what is going to happen. So that's a very good tool.
You asked the question as to know how can we, if we can change the timeline, and your teacher said yes.
Yes.
So how can you change it?
And when I do see the future, and I see it all the time for people in their readings, I can tell them, this is what I see, this is what I want you to do in this period of time. And now people are even asking me during the readings if I can tell how long a certain person will live, if they have an illness or something like that. And I've been asked to do that several times, and I don't like to do it, but if they're really intent on knowing, I have done that for them.
Mm-hmm. So moving on now from your experience with remote viewing, you decided to then do some more courses on, you became a psychic, or you followed some more courses. Can you lead me through the type of courses you've done after remote viewing, please?
I trained with Pam Coronado in psychic detective courses, and some mediumship courses with a minister, and then at Arthur Findlay College in England, which was life-changing, really exquisite training by some of the finest tutors in the world, and really helped me refine my skills.
Can you explain how complementary those techniques were with remote viewing, for example? You already had a gift since, as a child. How could these be complementary to your experience?
Wow. Well, let's see. People come to me for all kinds of reasons. And, sometimes they want future predictions, or they want to connect with deceased people. And I find that the skill sets are interrelated and complementary. So I haven't stopped training, because I can always learn more, and I can be more specific in different areas, and I still am challenged in certain areas too. But I'm finding that my abilities are evolving, and it's really exciting. It can be very difficult at times, depending on the reading. But currently I'm taking associated remote viewing training with a physicist on how to predict future outcomes on exact times and exact days, which I thought in the beginning would be impossible. But I've since found out it's very easy, and it's very exciting.
So going back to the psychic detective training, can you give us an example on the kind of experiences you had helping potentially is it the RCMP or the police forces?
I have worked on, I think, 3 cases, for the authorities. I've also worked on other missing person cases from just general public. And the work can be very difficult, because when you have contact with the site, you can feel how the person died, if they've died, or if they're just missing and they're alive. I can follow the scenario right through to see and feel and hear the experience of the person.
And in your case, let's say the 3 cases you just mentioned, were they conclusive? Were you able to find not only the person, but also the person who was involved in the offense?
When I worked on those cases, I just gave the information and left. I was not attached to the outcome, and I didn't follow through with or follow up with them afterwards.
Right.
But on the other cases where I've worked for people looking for missing persons, the information was provided back to me. I don't know if the authorities work in that way. But private citizens have followed up with me and given me confirmation of the work that I've done. For instance, with Pam Coronado, we were taught to, she would send us pictures of people, and we had to discern whether they were alive or dead. And I could tell like that right away if they were alive or dead. And then she would give us confirmation after we submitted our work. Another person asked me to locate someone who was missing, and I was sent a picture, and I knew right away the person was dead. And so that's what I sent. And they said, well, can you help find the body? And I did a controlled remote viewing session and drew a sketch, and I sent that to them. And that's where the person was found. So I'm able to do it. It's difficult work.
Is that the reason why you gave it up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little more grievous work than I want to be doing.
Yes. Yeah. Is that because you felt that you were experiencing more negative vibes, and that was opening up a whole different kind of worms in a way?
Partly, because I was nearly murdered myself. I was initially drawn to help in that capacity, missing or murdered people, because I can totally relate to someone trying to kill you. And in that way, the work is meaningful and personal. But I'd like to move beyond that and do other kinds of work, which I do. And I like to help people overcome the loss and the grief, because that's a very complicated set of human condition that a lot of people are suffering with.
Now, Terry, you are currently offering classes on basic remote viewing. Is there a reason why you want to limit the group to 6 people currently, or are you doing larger groups as well?
I decided to start with just 6 so that I could give individual attention.
Okay.
Because it's a refined process, and each person needs individual attention to connect what they're doing. It's kind of hard to grasp when you first start.
And do you feel that everybody have roughly the same abilities, or do they is it different from one person to another?
It's different from one person to another.
Okay. And in that sense, are you giving them the tools to grow in that aspect so they can actually experience what everybody else is experiencing?
Yes.
Okay. Could you kind of describe that slightly or just briefly?
Well, the first basic course would be learning the language, which are the ideograms, the little diagrams that we use to disengage our logical mind and use the superconscious mind to get the information, because it comes to you like your body's an antenna. I think that's the best way to describe it.
So Terry, based on your current classes that you're offering, how many classes are you planning on doing per year?
I'm planning on doing at least 6 per year.
Okay.
To start with.
And do you offer any training online, for example, or is it just like face-to-face?
It's face-to-face so far.
Okay.
I'd like to be able to offer it online.
Okay.
When I build up to that level.
Okay. And I'm just going to give you the last word. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, this is the most interesting, exciting field I've ever been involved in, and the most meaningful. It has unlimited abilities to help people. And after my near-death experience, that became the focus of my life. Kind of a core center was to help others. That, I feel, is the reason that I came back to this life.
Okay.
With a new body.
Right.
That's how it felt,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Terry. It was great meeting you.
Thank you.
And this is Sebastien Martin, your host for Open Timeline, and see you next time.